In a recent video, I talked about the radical of a kanji. Not the radical as in just any component, but the main radical assigned to each character. These are labeled bushu and serve to assist in categorization and search for kanji. However, alongside the main radical, or bushu, there is also a phonetic component, called onpu, literally meaning phonetic component. Unlike bushu, onpu aren't officially listed in dictionaries, and they are in general more loose. This doesn't mean they aren't real though. In fact, the majority of kanji, at least in daily use, are made up of two parts: a semantic component showing the meaning and a phonetic component hinting at the pronunciation. However, they did serve a very important role in the creation of kanji. This all stems from how the original Chinese characters were created long ago. These types of kanji, originally made up of a semantic and a phonetic component, are labeled as keisei emoji, with keisei meaning phonosemantic and moji meaning character. So characters with a phonological component and a semantic component. It's said that in Chinese, around 80% of characters are formed this way, with some of the remaining amount being pictographs and more basic characters. To learn about these characters though, we need to go back to the original creation of the characters, not starting in Japan, but ancient China. The phonosemantic characters didn't just appear randomly, they were developed, not from scratch though. Ancient China was already developing a pretty impressive writing system, for the time period at least. At the time, most of the characters were fairly basic, making up that small portion of pictographic characters I mentioned previously. There were some more complex characters though. The bad thing about having simple characters though is that they don't really convey complex ideas, they convey simple ones. So how do you make your characters more complex in order to convey more specific ideas? Well, one option is to just make more characters, but then you end up with an even longer list of basic characters for a script that is already quite lengthy as is. Even back then, it was pretty apparent that making 10,000 more characters for specific things wasn't going to work. This led to the idea of phonosemantic characters, essentially turning the process of creating a new character from scratch into a pretty simple puzzle. If you wanted to make the character for river, you could use the smaller character for water, then find a radical that fits the phonetic side, and boom. Sorry. You now have river, made up of water and your phonetic character. Now, this new character would be easy enough for your fellow Chinese scholars, philosophers, and royalty to pick up on and remember. Then, when they need a new character, they would do the same process, and then given some time, a whole lot of these phonosemantic characters were created. That simplicity is what makes these so common today. With the Chinese backstory out of the way though, we should probably get back to Japanese. That's what the video is about after all. The clerical script, or the version of Chinese that actually had widespread phonosemantic characters, was created even before Japan got their hands on the writing system. Due to this, by the time Japan got the writing system, there was already a lot of keisei moji in Chinese. And since the phonetic component was already made for Chinese, it kind of complicated things in Japan when they came over, since obviously Japan and Chinese don't have the same words. Due to this, the words carried off in the keisei emoji. However, there are some fundamental differences that muddy the waters here a little bit. In case you never compared Chinese and Japanese together, here you go. It's clear why the waters would be pretty muddy. Compared to Chinese, which has a pretty limited amount of readings, Japanese does not. From my understanding, Chinese not only had time to create their writing system with their language, developing simultaneously, but they also didn't really have a ton of foreign words. Now compare this to Japanese. The language got a writing system relatively later on, it imported a ton of new words from Chinese, and the characters were foreign, leading to native and foreign pronunciations. The keisei emoji only apply to Chinese onyomi, and even then it's not 100% because they didn't just get all the characters at once and immediately learn them. Instead, they were adopted at different periods of time, leading to some discrepancies. Not all hope is lost though. There still are a great amount of kanji that kept their phonetic component. Actually, in the Shinji-tai reforms, they intentionally kept keisei emoji intact. The Shinji-tai reforms were essentially the simplification of kanji, similar to Hanzi's simplification. During these reforms, one of the main goals was to reduce the stroke count of characters and make them simpler to read, write, and categorize. Making sure the phonetic component stayed intact, they replaced complex parts with simpler homophones. Basically, keeping the pronunciation without making a new radical and simplifying it all at the same time, which I think is pretty cool. Let's get to some examples though. Some of these really surprised me when I first saw them because I just never made the connection. I will only be going through joyo kanji here in these examples. It's really easy to go find some one-off kanji that people have seen like 2 times, but I think it's a lot more useful to actually use commonplace kanji, and it makes it more interesting. Anyways, the first one I wanted to talk about is a, eternity, offering the phonetic component a, used in kanji like a, and a. In all seriousness though, you can see the semantic and phonetic parts pretty easily here. A is the phonetic, not really lending any meaning. At least, I don't think eternity has much to do with swimming or poems. Well, maybe a little bit with poems. Instead, you see where the semantic part comes in here. Swimming uses the water radical, and poems uses the speech radical. A reverse version of these kanji using a would be shi, jo, so, and do, all having different phonetic components, yet sharing the idea of an emotion due to the heart radical. Remember how I said there was multiple onyomi? These are a good example of that. This radical can be used in words with the reading of ka, like what, baggage, and river. However, it can also be used in words like draw, near, strange, promontory, and equestrian, read as ki. While it is cool, it kind of does suck in the sense that it removes the straightforward element of these phonetic components. I do really like looking at all the quirks of kanji and how they are unique, but if I'm being honest, I don't think I would mind having readings and stuff like that be a little less diverse. Anyways, last one, ho. This isn't a ton of joyo kanji, that being like 6 of them, but I do think that's a lot. Learning 6 characters for the price of 1, that's pretty good. You have words like wrap, embrace, bubbles, sheath, cannon, and sated, all with the ho reading. The reason I brought these up, though, isn't because of the abundance of kanji with this phonetic radical, but the radicals that come with it. I'm going to assume you're already familiar with these, and I think that's what makes keisei moji so cool, because these are way easier to remember when you already know the meaning of one radical and the pronunciation of the other. Compared to what I said before about making 10,000 new characters, now you only have over 200, which is a lot better. There doesn't really need to be some super informative thing where canon is made up of metal, cylinder, ball, and gunpowder. Anyways, if you want to see a video of an in-depth breakdown of the joyo list into keisei kanji, let me know that in the comments. I don't really include that many examples in these videos because 1, it takes forever to compile the kanji. Even just those 3 basic examples was around 20 kanji. And on top of that, I have to do all of this stuff, but if you find the examples interesting, let me know so I can put more time into it. Anyways, thanks for watching. Go watch this video which talks about specifically the main radical of the kanji. Not to be confused with the semantic part of the kanji, but often it is the semantic part of the kanji. Like, subscribe, thanks, bye bye.
也去看看这个视频吧。